Minnesota escapes New Orleans in overtime, 26-20, first time in the NFL's 100 years where they had a wild card weekend. Featured two overtime games. Houston and Buffalo went to OT on Saturday. New Orleans and Minnesota play an extra period on Sunday.
It was so much more fun to watch the Houston-Buffalo game, though, when there was no stress, and it was just like, wow, this game's drunk right now. It's awesome. Sit in the back porch Saturday night, just enjoyed some NFL playoffs. The Saints game was much different, as it just kind of felt like you were just grasping at straws, grinding, just hoping for some sort of offensive consistency the entire game.
Did it feel early on to you? I mean, even after Thielen's early fumble where the Saints were set up, they had first and goal on that opening drive opportunity. They only came away with 3 points, where it felt like Danielle Hunter and Everson Griffin were going to be hell all day against two of the Saints' better players, Ramczyk and Armstead. They gave those guys fits all afternoon, and then Zimmer made the adjustment and found the weakness in that Saints offensive line, which is in the interior.
Yeah.
And put Hunter and Griffin inside. And from that point on, those two guys were unblockable. I mean, they were hell yesterday.
Yeah. And I mean, you mentioned it. That is the moment that stands out to me. And yes, look, Andrews Pete struggled. Andrews Pete is the weak link of the line. We've known that. And
he was banged up yesterday.
Well, and it's not even that Pete is really bad. I think the Saints are really good on the offensive line outside of Pete, and so his mistakes kind of tend to shine a bit brighter. But it's not Pete getting beat that stands out in my mind. It's exactly what you were talking about, Jordy. You get the turnover. Looks like you're going to score a touchdown. So this game, and then the Vikings defense holds, but they hold because of a sack where Ryan Ramczyk and Teron Armstead on the same play get beat in the same way by Danielle Hunter and Everson Griffin, who then combine for the sack on Brees. That was a tone setter to me. And when you're talking about Armstead and Ramczyk, it is not an exaggeration to call them two of the top 10 offensive tackles in the league. And so that's a point where, look, that's not game planning. That's just one-on-one football. That's just winning that battle. And Hunter and Griffin, they won that battle. And it's kind of indicative of the Vikings game as a whole yesterday. There's no scapegoat. There's nobody to blame. Sometimes you have to tip your cap to the opponent, and you have to tip your cap to Minnesota yesterday because they controlled that game and they just outplayed the Saints and they flat out won that game. And it's frustrating because the Saints, it feels like they did a lot of uncharacteristic things.
They did, T. They turned the ball over for the first time. I mean, fumble all year.
Yeah, so that's one area to highlight. And this is maybe something that I kind of want to explore throughout this conversation. The Saints are such heavy favorites. They're at home in the playoffs. How do you lose that game? And the reason why I think that's important to highlight is because there are some similarities with LSU and Clemson. Like LSU is for a championship game, they are a heavy favorite, right, in that dome. So how then do you lose that game? The Saints were leading the NFL in scoring over the final half of the year, over the final 7 weeks, 36.5 points per game, leads the NFL. How does that offense then get stopped to the point where they only scored 20, including an overtime? And there's a few areas I think that you can highlight, and Jeff Duncan talks about him. It's the most important areas of the game. It's the eternal football elements, and that's turnovers, third down, and red zone. And I don't care how good you are at everything else, or how bad you are, if you win those battles, those statistical battles, you have a very good chance of winning the game. And you mentioned turnovers. Let's just start there. You said an NFL record this season. The Saints only turned the ball over 8 times in 16 games. Basic math dictates that's half a turnover per game. Well, he did it twice yesterday. That's quadruple your season average. That's how this sort of upset comes about.
Yeah, it's easy to look at the officials from yesterday and ask on the final play with Rudolph and Williams why there was no replay on the offensive pass interference or alleged offensive pass interference. But really, start to finish, New Orleans got their butt whipped all day in that game by Minnesota, specifically on both lines of scrimmage.
Well, yeah, and even in credit to the Saints for doing a very good job of adjusting in the second half, but even Dalvin Cook in that first half, controlling the game. I mean, the Saints, one of the best run defenses, not just this year in the NFL, but over the past few years. Of course, the streak where they haven't allowed a 100-yard rusher in 40-whatever games. Did Cook end up hitting 100?
No, it's 97.
Wow. Okay.
46 straight games.
So the streak continues, but still, that first half, I think he had about 80 of those 97. So yeah, the Vikings won the battle line of scrimmage. That's one element. The Saints turned the ball over. That's another element. We mentioned quadruple their season average. The Vikings.
Will Lutz missing a field goal.
Will Lutz.
Mr. Consistent.
Yep. And credit to him. He came back and he hit the huge one to send you into overtime. But in the playoffs, like, that's the margin of error, right? Like, that's how small it is. The Saints had a golden opportunity to steal one back after the Deontay Harris return. They had no business getting a field goal with that little time left, and Harris set them up, and they missed that opportunity. And then you look at something we mentioned, third down. The Vikings, just 41% coming in the game. They go 10 of 18 yesterday. That's 15% above their season average. The Vikings on the year, when they got in the red zone, they scored touchdowns 61% of the time. They went 3 of 4 yesterday. That's 15% above their season average. So on one hand, you had a team that did not play in the way that the stats would have told you, right? That played excellent all year, but didn't play the best game. On the other hand, you had an underdog that stepped up in the most important facets of the game. And so if you're looking for statistical guidelines to next Monday, numbers to watch, to maybe how concerned should you be during that game, beyond just like the score, look at things like that. Third down percentage, how are they doing when they get in the red zone, and then turnovers are just an obvious eternal rule of football.
Sean Payton was talking about one of the aspects yesterday that gave New Orleans fits throughout the afternoon, and that was the defensive line for Minnesota. Here's Payton talking about that group.
Well, we got a little bit more of a run front on early downs. They played some jam, some things to make it a little bit more difficult. Like I said, I didn't think we particularly ran the ball efficiently enough in the first half. I felt like we found a few things in the second half that began hanging our hat on. We had a handful of minus plays. Our third down numbers at the half, I think we were 1 of 4s. We struggled in protection early, obviously, and that time of possession in the first half, and the time of the amount of snaps you have when you're struggling on the third downs that we had were you felt like there weren't a lot of snaps to begin with in the first half. So I thought they did a good job on the third down plays. We needed to be better. It was a fairly low-scoring, tight game throughout. Look, they made more plays than we did.
Yeah, and one thing that third down percentage translates into, Jordy, and this doesn't have as much relevance to the LSU game. This is more, I think, applicable in the NFL, where it's a more ball control style. But one of the reasons why the offense couldn't really get going, they didn't have a ton of opportunities. The Vikings stayed on the field for a long time. When you go 10 of 18 on third down, although they didn't make it into a ton of points, they managed to stay on the field for about 10 minutes more than the Saints did. It's just, I don't know. Do you have any more analysis on the game? Because I don't have much more to say about what went wrong. To me, the conversation just kind of transitions into how disappointing it all is.
Yeah.
Because these, like Demario Davis talked about yesterday, the window of opportunity are so they're so few and far between, and every season is truly singular. And you look back on what this team went through, losing Brees, making it through with Bridgewater. And it wasn't all good moments, right? Like the tough loss to the Niners. Like, there were ups, there were downs, and yet they still managed to fight for 13-3. They were the big favorite playing a playoff game in the Dome. Like, they had so much going for them, and they had so much belief in themselves that when to end in this way, and then, look, it's not going to be the same team next year. And that's something that you saw echoed a lot. And it shows how close this locker room is. It's just the way of the NFL. It's the meat market. It's not going to be the same guys. And you never know, if you'll get this opportunity again. The end can come really quickly in the NFL, right? Look at the Los Angeles Rams. Not only did they not make the playoffs last year, but what does their future look like now? They commit to a couple of wrong guys, make a couple of wrong moves in free agency, maybe give up too much draft capital. And now the Los Angeles Rams kind of feel irrelevant to the NFL power picture as a whole, do they not?
Yeah.
And so you never know when that day is coming for you, and you hope it's not next year. And let's be clear, I don't think it's next year. I still like a lot of the elements going forward, but it's just, to get so close these last 3 years to seem like you have so much positive momentum, and for it to slip away, it's brutal. And it's just another year where we're going to sit here and say, can these guys somehow use that for motivation, or at least the guys who will still be here in New Orleans?
Brees and the Saints, of course, and Peyton, so consistent over the last couple of years, 3 years winners of the NFC South. both quarterbacks now, Brees and Brady, going into an offseason where they're free agents. I mean, the future around those guys and their current franchises settles in a certain case of uncertainty, which is a little weird when you watch that game on Saturday night in Foxborough. Brady's last pass ends in a pick six.
Yeah.
To the Tennessee Titans, and then of course the way that
first time he's ever thrown pick sixes in back-to-back weeks in his entire career.
And then the way that Brees and New Orleans finished the game yesterday in New Orleans. Brees hadn't fumbled the ball all season long, is a crucial fumble late in the game. Also a costly interception that was headed in the direction of Ted Ginn early on. So I don't know, man. What does the future look like for both franchises, specifically when you're talking about the New Orleans Saints down here in this part of the country? 3 straight years on 3 brutal exits from the playoffs. Of course, the Minnesota Miracle in 2017, 2018 was the no call with the NFC Championship, and then of course yesterday with the overtime loss to Minnesota 26-20 in the Dome.
I think that look, I just off the bat, I think Brees returning to New Orleans, I think that happens. I think that's very clear. I think also it's probably most likely that Brady returns to New England, but I feel like Brees and New Orleans are on firmer footing. I feel like Brees is a little younger. If you want to talk about fall off, that's what's weird. While you can combine these guys into this, you can lump them in the same conversation because it's similar, Hall of Fame, first ballot guys, 40 plus years old, been doing this forever. They both lose on this weekend. I get that. But if you look at the years that they had, they are polar opposite, right? Like Brady really struggled throughout the year, was one of the, at least statistically, worst quarterbacks in the entire NFL. Now, you can have the conversation, was that because of the weapons? Was that because of Brady falling off? Was it age? Like, as far as the root cause, I don't really care. But the truth is, he did not play well. Brees kicked ass. Brees kicked ass all year long. Like when Brees came out, he was NFC Offensive Player of the Month for the month of December.
15 touchdowns, no picks.
Yeah, so Brees still has it. Okay, he's still got left, like a lot left in the tank. And I think Brady does too. Like I do think, in my personal opinion, that Brady's problems were more about the weapons and what they're surrounding him with. But that said, I would feel very comfortable if I'm the Saints committing to Drew Brees. Also, the Saints have proven to be not as ruthlessly cut and dry as the Patriots at times. I don't know if the Patriots would have paid Mike Thomas. The Saints did. They were rewarded for it with an NFL record season. So, I think Brees and Saints, I think that's good. They'll be fine. There's other guys I'm not sure. They still have to make decisions on Eli Apple, Bridgewater, Klein, Andrews Pete, P.J. Williams, David Onyemata, Vaughn Bell. So, they got other questions to answer. As far as Brady and the Pats go, the reason why that feels less sure is because of that ruthlessness that the Patriots have displayed in the past, specifically Bill Belichick's proclivity for cutting anybody if he feels, and they've always operated on, rather cut a guy a year too early as opposed to a year too late. So they're ruthless. I guess the question becomes, how much does this decision even go through Belichick? Or is this more of like a Kraft to Brady thing? They obviously have their own relationship, and what Brady's done for Bob Kraft and that franchise is irreplaceable. But there is, to me, in my mind, outside looking in, not covering that team, there does seem to be potential friction there, where maybe the kind of ruthless, pragmatic nature of Belichick would lean towards maybe it's time to move on, whereas Kraft, I think, is going to have a more emotional relationship with Brady, and he may want to bring him back.
Brees was asked about his future yesterday, obviously, following the loss, and here he was on the podium.
I'm not making any comments on that other than, I've told you guys this for the last, couple of years. I've always just taken it one year at a time and kind of reevaluate each off season and then, find the things I want to get better at and move on.
I see a lot of people talking about Brees and a noodle arm and this or that. And I get saying that because of the deep ball that was such a poor decision and had no real chance of working, and it ends up being an interception. But once again, we cannot be prisoners of the moment when it comes to evaluating what the true form of Drew Brees is. Offensive Player of the Month, 15 touchdowns, no picks in December. He can still ball. If you wonder why he looked bad yesterday, what have we always said? We talked a lot of LSU this year, how to stop Joe Burrow. what do we say is the golden rule, bottom line key to stopping any elite quarterback? It's the eternal rule. You got to be able to get pressure with 4. And if you can get pressure with 4 and drop 7, you can make anybody look pedestrian. You can make anybody look normal. And that's exactly what the Vikings did yesterday. And that's exactly what no team has been able to do against LSU this season.
All right, the last play of the game, so people are talking about with Kyle Rudolph on P.J. Williams. P.J. Williams isolated on Kyle Rudolph. That's 6-foot cornerback guarding 6'4".
I mean, you saw
tight end.
Troy circled it before the play started. It ain't rocket science. You get Rudolph one-on-one up top against a cornerback, you know where Cousins is going with the ball.
In a zero blitz where the Saints are selling out everybody. So it's one-on-one, true
And
one-on-one.
I like the call. I mean, I don't think it's a problem with the call. I actually like being a bit more aggressive as opposed to like hanging back and trying to play some sort of shallow zone there.
Here is Peyton asked if he got a explanation on what happened on the last play of the game.
I didn't see any officials. I saw Mike. We chatted for a little bit and saw some of the other players we coached in the Pro Bowl and congratulated them. And they did a good job. They played well.
So Peyton with no explanation on the final play of the game where we talked about it early in the year with the Saints being the backbone of this rule change. At some point, I thought it was going to haunt New Orleans. Whether or not they replay that last play, the Saints got beat yesterday. But I think for the letter of the law, for the sake of the rule, in that scenario, I mean, if you're going to stop a game in September and October and look at something in that same type of situation in a wild card weekend where you don't replay that from upstairs, I think that's almost inexcusable to the NFL. I don't expect it because I've seen so much egregious activity with the officials and not getting an explanation and not quite understanding really what's going on out there. But in a playoff scenario, to have that call and that rule in place and not go to the video, man, I was very confused on why that didn't happen.
I don't know if I'm with y'all on that. To me, it didn't look any more egregious than what you see on a lot of plays. They were both hand fighting. Is it a push off?
I mean, T,
yes.
You've seen both officiate Terry McAuley on Sunday night NBC NFL. You've seen Dean Blandino of the NFL come out. You've seen other officials come out and say it was obviously offensive PI where the offensive player got an advantage by extending his arm against the defender and creating space, right? Whether or not it would have held up as offensive pass interference, that's okay. I mean, that's fine. You can debate it. But if those guys with those qualifications and the responsibility of officiating the game behind their name, they believe it was, the rules in place to go to New York to replay the video in that situation where there's a playoff game on the line. You're not going to review it? You're not even going to take a look at it?
Yeah, look, man, if I obviously cannot sit here and say that I know more. Like Dean Blandino and McCauley and these guys you referenced, they know more. I don't know. To me, it felt like hand fighting. It felt like the replay. I guess it's like you said. That's why you put the replay face. But it's like, is that how you want the game decided? And then should that even matter? I mean, I guess it shouldn't. It should be objective. So maybe they get together and they say, oh, we screwed this up. But I don't think so. I mean, they reviewed it in New York and they came out and their official statement is that there wasn't enough to amount to a penalty. So maybe that's my point, right? Like if there can be that gray area where some referees are going to say, to me, that's OPI. And others are going to say, well, to me, that's actually not OPI. Then I don't think you can call that OPI. Like in that setting with the game on the line, I think it has to be almost egregious for you to call. In fact, you probably could have gotten a little more physical on defense there. And I don't think it would have been called either. So credit Rudolph for making a big play.
Yeah, and let the record show, I don't think that it came down to the last play of the game. I don't think the Saints deserved to win that game because for 4.5 quarters, they got their ass kicked.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, like up and down the field on both lines of scrimmage. I just say for the letter of the law, for the sake of the rule, you have it in place and you have a wild card game come down to the final play where it looks like it's a debate of offensive pass interference and you don't even look at it.
It's a fair conversation.
What's the rule in place for? And you'll stop a game in September and October for 10 minutes to look at that play and you won't look at the one in January? Huh?